Musings of a Modern Conservative, Short Essays on Various Political Topics, by Thomas Hamilton. Section 3, Musings on Various Modern Political Topics, Essay 18, Not in My Backyard, Musings on the Environment. There are some who can live without wild things, and some who cannot. These essays are the delights and dilemmas of one who cannot. Like winds and sunsets, wild things were taken for granted until progress began to do away with them. Now we face the question whether a still higher standard of living is worth its cost in things natural, wild, and free. For us of the minority, the opportunity to see geese is more important than television, and the chance to find a Pasquet flower is a right as inalienable as free speech. These wild geese, I admit, had little human value until mechanization assured us of a good breakfast, and until science disclosed the drama of where they come from and how they live. The whole conflict thus boils down to a question of degree. We of the minority see a law of diminishing returns in progress. Our opponents do not. This quote is from the book A Sand County Almanac and was penned by its author, Aldo Leopold, in 1948. I use this quote to illustrate 2 points before I begin this essay. First, that environmentalism is not some markedly new concept. And second, that environmentalism is not a matter of absolutism, but, as was mentioned, a simple matter of degree. What do I mean by degree? Are humans exactly part of the natural world anymore? Should we even be completely part of the supposed natural world? What sort of modern benefits would we have to give up in order to accommodate a more natural integration with nature? What is a natural integration with nature? Where do humans fit into nature? Could it be possible that we are acting as naturally as possible? Could it be that we add our own constraints to what would be very natural for us to make skyscrapers? Is there any creature in the world that is told it cannot build? Is it for us humans that we simply have a grand scale of things? Or could it be that we just perceive that we are acting outside of the natural world? Termites build gigantic mounds relative to their size, and army ants consume everything in their path. So why are human advancements different? As I move forward with this musing, I want the reader to keep in mind that all things large and small, at least for the conservative, come down to a matter of degree. The question becomes, at what point do we as conservatives stop? When have we removed too much from the world we live in before we have destroyed something that cannot be replaced? Much of the modern environmental movement boils down to 2 words, global and warming. I find that both of these words seem to be less than forthcoming unto what they are and what they mean. First, I want to examine global. Doesn't global have in its meaning to encompass the entire globe? In other words, doesn't global mean everything? So to take this global warming on face, everything would need to be warming, right? Then if everything is warming, wouldn't everything need to at least in some measure work toward cooling everything off? What if one section didn't participate in this cooling? Would this global warming then only become mostly global warming? Would we be able to globally cool if one section of this globe chose not to cool? If we take on face value that we are warming, how could we reasonably control the entire globe to cool it off? How could we reduce all the globe's carbon emissions or any global warming causing agent? Rather than thinking of what can I do, think more on the lines of what would all the globe do? Why look in this manner? Simple. If it is the entire globe that is going to warm, and not all the globe is going to participate in cooling, then could be there any significant impact? Wouldn't we have to get the entire globe to participate? How about the word warming? Isn't a state of warming a matter of perspective? Have you ever asked somebody if they are warm or cold? Have they ever given a response that was the opposite of what you were thinking? So if something is warming, it has to be warmer than something, right? I do admit, I have heard this argument before amongst conservatives, but I think it bears repeating. If we are warming, then where are we warming from? Could it be that we are right now cooler than the Earth is supposed to be? That somehow the Earth is supposed to be at periods warmer than others? Could it be that at some point it is cooler than other times? What if we are warmer? Is it bad to be warmer than the Earth should be? Could it be that we might like the Earth a little warmer? Could we adapt to such an environment? Haven't we adapted many other things to our liking, such as apples and oranges and other fruits? How about livestock and other animals? How about dogs? Are there truly any dogs out in nature as they exist with humans? Does anyone suggest that all dogs be returned to their natural state? Does anyone suggest that we shouldn't have changed and domesticated dogs? I think that dogs are a benefit to humans, don't you? If dogs are a benefit to humans, couldn't a warmer environment also be a benefit? This argument, I do admit, is a rather ostentatious one. But do we actually know what we are warming from? And if we do, how can we be certain that it is bad? Could it be that we would be better off with a warmer Earth? Could a warmer Earth help us in the future somehow? What if another ice age came about? Again, this argument seems and is meant to be far-fetched. But don't all the global warming stories seem as equally far-fetched? I bring up global warming only to illustrate this simple point. Focusing on one small fact of the environment, i.e. aggregate global temperature control, doesn't seem as nostalgic anymore, does it? Is not environmentalism. Shouldn't environmentalism focus on just that, the environment? Shouldn't it focus on things much more meaningful? Shouldn't it focus its attention on things that if we do nothing, our children will not be able to experience? This is why I ask the question to conservatives. As we fight against those who ought to be considered our strong allies, to what degree can we claim is enough? Are there things that are too precious to us, that no matter the cost, we would not want to injure or do away with? What of the redwoods, the Great Lakes and rivers, forests and mountains that we can claim as our land? Is it just simply land, or is it more than that? What if the Great Lakes were all sucked up dry, and in their place, put a large machine that produced just as much water and could maintain just as many fish and other marine life? Would we miss them? Would we as Americans want to take our children to the giant machine? What would we tell them if we took them there? Would we tell them of the Great Lakes that were once there? How many generations would simply be told of the Great Lakes before no one had ever seen a Great Lake, but simply looked at one in a photo or had one described to them? Would this be an America that we would be proud of? Would this be an America that we conservatives could be proud of? This is what I mean by a matter of degree. I would wager that there are many lakes in many parts of America, that while their lakes are important, they are not markedly unique. I know, I have seen such lakes. Some of these lakes may get the giant machine, but not them all. Shouldn't we as humans be able to change parts of the natural world, just like a beaver changes a river? Can't we find a way to live with and about the environment without destroying it? How would this be conservative, though? Isn't the environment all to the benefit of the collective and not the individual? This is exactly where I think the argument has been lost. This movement ought to be and should have always been a conservative one, for if not for the individuals, how could the beauty of the mountains, the freshness of the air, or the calm of the beach be measured? Do these things even have value, if not for the individual? I do admit that we conservatives lose ourselves in the pursuit for progress, but isn't it the nature of the conservative to work towards a better future, if not for a better future, then what for? Due to this, the human impacts are often looked at first, rather than the impact on the environment. But what is the impact to an environment? It may be difficult to tell an individual that they cannot do something, but would a true conservative seek to harm another? I do not think so, and no conservative is amoral. In fact, the very item that defines a conservative is their adherence to a moral foundation. So if we were all conservative, would we need laws to protect the environment? In this case, wouldn't the moral answer be not to destroy that which we could not replace? Wouldn't we conservatives only take that which we could reasonably expect would be replaced? Could there be other impacts that we couldn't foresee? And if so, how could we reasonably claim that we are only taking what we ought to? I am rather sure that all things we do have an impact. So again, it boils down to what degree do we conservatives need to look towards as a benchmark. I will return to global warming as a means of benchmarking, as I think it is a very modern example of both good and bad environmental policy. What is the answer to global warming, and what are its causes? This question is a very hard one to answer, as I think the general science on this is less than sure. But for the sake of this musing, let us say that it is carbon dioxide, and that, for the sake of this musing, that motor vehicles in general, although I will use the word cars as a general word, produce the most of this substance. I will not take on face that global warming is occurring, although I cannot say that it is not occurring either. Instead, I will presume from this vantage point. Would less carbon dioxide be bad? What should be done then to reduce carbon dioxide? Shouldn't we reduce vehicle emissions? What would fewer vehicle emissions mean, though? Wouldn't it simply be using less fuel? So what if we do use less fuel? Would that be a bad thing? Wouldn't a vehicle that only used 1 gallon of gasoline per 40 miles be better than one that used 1 per 20? Wouldn't that save the consumer some money? In other words, wouldn't such a vehicle be more competitive in the marketplace? Wouldn't a car that costs the user less money be better than one that costs more? Wouldn't this car create a competitive advantage? So even if global warming is happening, wouldn't we start trying to build cars that outperform our current cars? The same can be said of power plants as well. If someone can make a solar panel that can produce energy even under moonlight, then that would be a great competitive advantage, right? At that time, would we need to get rid of coal-fired power plants? Wouldn't these coal plants, with all their workers, eventually become outdated, just like the car has made the horse outdated? Would replacing all the coal plants in America solve the problem of global warming? But what of other solutions to this global warming problem? Could we begin with other things as well? How about nuclear and natural gas? Does new energy have to be perfect and now, or can it measure up to a matter of degree? If no one wants to take the first steps, to take the risk, to be, if not just a little imperfect, then how do we as Americans learn to walk? Couldn't we start with nuclear power that works the best in the world, move to natural gas that we have plenty of and is semi-renewable, and then move to solar? Did we humans just suddenly wake up from our caves and say if we can't drive an automobile, then we certainly won't ride a horse? Even if we accept global warming as some form of fact, would we need to change anything to get the results we are looking for? Wouldn't we still be looking for ways to make our cars more efficient? Wouldn't we still be looking for a way to put the coal plant out of business? In other words, wouldn't we be always looking for better, more efficient energy? Shouldn't we conservatives be looking to conserve the environment? Isn't this what the environmental movement should be? Doesn't the idea of global warming seem somehow over-exaggerated and disproportionate? Doesn't it seem somewhat superstitious? When thinking of superstitions, don't we think of things that are universally the same? And that everyone will experience if they do or do not do something? Aren't the consequences all rather grand and extreme? Don't they all lack a matter of degree?